Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntire's Morning Update.
So what exactly has happened with the Matthew Livelsberger story? I was asked a question a couple of weeks ago on Ask or Tell Me Anything, and I said, you know what, maybe we'll look into the Matthew Livelsberger story again. So I did over the weekend, and here's what I found. Jack Squat. Now, of course, that's from an official standpoint. That's not too much of a surprise. The only thing that I've seen recently is actually this from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It's a piece written by Arthur Kane. He's the editor of the investigations department at the Las Vegas Journal-Review. And he had this piece headlined, "What Are They Hiding? Metro Withholds Manifesto of Cybertruck Bomber." The Metropolitan Police Department punted to the federal government when it came to releasing the manifesto written by Cybertruck bomber Matthew Livelsberger, claiming a number of exemptions, but also that federal officials say it contains classified information. The denial raises questions about what in the manifesto is a secret, especially when Livelsberger alleged that he participated in war crimes during his service in Afghanistan. Henry Sokolsky, the executive director of the Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center, a think tank that deals with weapons proliferation, also has written about the government's tendency to overclassify documents when no sensitive information is involved. Sokolsky said the classification process and any reviews are so flawed that often bureaucrats are classifying documents just to have more control in their offices or protect their jobs. He added that a bill was introduced last year to define what should be classified, but it hasn't passed. Before Livelsberger died in the bombing January 1st, he sent an email to retired U.S. Army intelligence officer Sam Shoemate, alleging that Livelsberger was part of a cover-up of war crimes. Livelsberger blew up a Tesla Cybertruck that he had rented and filled with makeshift explosives, killing himself and injuring 7 other people in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. He told friends he'd suffered from PTSD, depression, and brain injuries from his service as a decorated Green Beret operations sergeant. When the Review-Journal requested a copy of Livelsberger's manifesto that investigators said they found on his phone, Metro Police initially responded that it isn't the custodian of the record and that evidence isn't a public record. When pressed, an unidentified Metro Public Information Officer emailed to say federal partners have the document and that they say it's classified. Previously, Metro officials also wrote that the manifesto does not record any public business and thus is not a public record. Instead, it is evidence collected by law enforcement pursuant to an investigation. So this is all we have. In the intervening time between basically January 15th is when this story really died down, and now, and it's absolutely Jack Squat. Credit to Arthur Kane at the Las Vegas Review-Journal for even writing this story recently. The only news that we have is that there's no news, and that federal officials basically came in, swooped in, took the investigation over from local police there in Las Vegas, and are doing their own investigation. So, I'm sorry, but goodness gracious, I understand why this story, for a number of reasons, got out of the limelight. We had this little thing called the inauguration in the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration. I think what makes this story particularly odd is that because of the Shoemate revelations on Sean Ryan's program, we had oodles of details that on cases like this we might have not been privy to right from the outset. And then nothing. Zilch ever since. It's kind of going in the same file as another Las Vegas incident. Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. We still don't have any good answers for what happened there. Seems like this story is going the exact same direction. And now here's this. Elon Musk joined Joe Rogan once again, went in depth on why exactly he went all in on Donald Trump.
The reason I went so hardcore for Trump was because, to me, this was a fork in the road, a very obvious fork in the road. If they had another 4 years, they would legalize enough illegals in the swing states to make the swing states not swing states. They would be blue states. Then they would win the presidential. They'd win the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They would then make D.C. into a state, maybe Puerto Rico, get 4 extra senators, pack the Supreme Court. So then you'll have the House, Judiciary, Senate, and presidency, all blue. And then they will keep importing more illegals to cement that outcome. Basically what happened in California.
Jesus Christ.
It would have been the end. That's why I went so hardcore for Trump. It was otherwise been the end. And that's why the Democrat machine is so intent on destroying me.
It's just so fascinating that people can't see this.
I mean, I invite people to do their research. The more they do their research, the more they will see that what I'm saying is absolutely true.
Elon Musk, latest appearance on Joe Rogan's. Why did I play that clip this morning? Because I think it is a very, very necessary reminder. With very limited exception, really one major exception, and that was the Epstein, whatever the heck that was, files, binders full of nothing from last week, with that being pretty much the only major exception. It's easy to get caught up in the euphoria of the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration and forget how perilously close America was from going off the cliff. Elon Musk hasn't forgotten, and I think we do well to do the same. Good for Elon Musk as well. I'm glad somebody with a position of power and influence like he hasn't forgotten these very important things, that we were this close from going off the edge.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at RealAMUpdate.
I just think this needs to be said. No matter where you fall on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, whether you just hate Ukrainians and want to get out of there or something, whatever, and I'm just exaggerating, or whether you have a Ukrainian flag in your bio and are willing to go die for Vlad, wherever you fall on that spectrum, it just blows my mind that people think Zelensky was a victim in any way after that exchange on Friday. I don't care how righteous these convictions were, whether he felt like he wasn't getting his points across or was being ignored. You just do not walk into the Oval Office and even come up to the line, toe the line of disrespect, much less fully cross over it. In every man's life, particularly young men, but there comes a time when your father, a father figure, a mentor has to tell you, you simply cannot behave this way. Toddlers get this message all the time. Tell Ben all the time, it's okay to be sad or upset, but we don't scream and cry. You cannot behave that way. But there comes a time in every man's life when he's old enough to know better, when we still need to be reminded about the order of things. Sometimes this happens at 8 years old, 11 years old, 15 years old, sometimes into your 20s. Accountability is a just but sometimes cruel female dog. Nevertheless, as a grown man, there are lines you just cannot cross and still expect a relationship or your reputation to be undamaged. You cannot mouth off or show disrespect to someone in authority over you, no matter how unfair they are, and expect there to be zero consequences. And it doesn't matter whether the person in authority over you is in the right or you are. I had to learn a similar lesson the hard way once, very early in my career. When my boss at the time, this was well before my current boss, by the way, when my boss at the time went postal on me for towing the aforementioned line of disrespect. Fortunately, this guy was a good man and we were able to reconcile. And unlike the current example at that job, there weren't hundreds of thousands of lives on the line. When it comes to hierarchical relationships, sometimes you have to eat a poop sandwich. Sometimes you're just being an ingrate. I happen to think that Zelensky is an ingrate, but in effect, the United States is Ukraine's boss. The United States, Donald Trump, is Zelensky's boss. And you just cannot do and say what Zelensky did on Friday and expect there to be no consequences. I thought this was just basic human psychology that a head of state would understand, but apparently not. More thoughts on Donald Trump's address to the joint session of Congress last night. 100 minutes long, very long speech, but it hit on all of the points, all of the things that really make America, America. Strength, bravery, persistence, boldness. Those are all qualities that made this nation what it is. He did it in his style, but this is not the same Donald Trump. This is the Donald Trump, I'd say 3.0. It was all of Donald Trump's personality, all of his all of his ability to kind of turn a phrase and flick off and tick off people who don't like him very much, but without any of the douchiness. This was the most presidential version of Donald Trump I've ever seen, but it was still Donald Trump. It was still his signature brand and style. He's obviously, don't say old dogs can't learn new tricks. He's obviously improved just as a communicator through these now almost a decade in politics. So I said earlier, these are all, he not only embodied, or he not only articulated, he embodied by making dreams come true last night on multiple occasions. He not only articulated, but he embodied the spirit of Americanism. The spirit of America. This is still the land of opportunity. You have opportunities. You can succeed. You will succeed. You can be strong. You can be bold. Truth, justice, and the American way. That's basically what I would call that speech last night. So, proud to be an American this morning. But I don't understand. I really don't understand. Talking about the Democrats. I do understand. But it still blows my mind nonetheless. Al Green, Congressman from Texas, I believe in Harris County, isn't that Houston? Al Green got up in the first 5 minutes, started waving his cane around and yelling at Donald Trump. It's all about me. That's basically what it is. It's all about me. Yelling about Trump being, I don't know. I couldn't tell. I don't care. Who thought that was a good idea? You just lost. You just got pantsed by this guy a few months ago. This is your first foray into public eye? Yeah, Houston is in Harris County. I believe that DJ Daniel, that young kid with brain cancer, I believe he's from Houston. I don't know if Al Green is his congressman or not. But he got booted. I mean, how bad does it have to be when you made Mike Johnson look like a frickin' badass for tossing you out and calling on the sergeant of arms to get you out of there? But then the rest of the night, no clapping for tax cuts. No clapping for a kid who wanted to go to West Point, and then Donald Trump, the freaking commander-in-chief, informs him, hey, you've been accepted. Pack your bags. No clapping for kids with cancer. No clapping for standing up for women's sports. No clapping for God made you just the way and loves you just the way you are. You're perfect just the way you are. And you're a boy or a girl, and there's no changing that, and that's okay. No clapping for that. These people in the opposition, they're just broken. They need Jesus so bad, but they hate him and anything that he stands for. And I think it's just that simple. You know, Elise Slotkin, the senator from Michigan, came on to give the Democrat rebuttal, and she tried to talk about things like the economy. But towards the beginning of her rebuttal, she tried to talk about shared values that we're supposed to have, Democrats and Republicans. After her party couldn't even bring themselves to clap for anything except for one thing, Ukraine, a foreign country. These people can never have real power again. And I'm here to tell you this morning, after what we heard last night, after what we've seen in the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, there ain't no going back. We are pot committed here on the side of truth, justice, and the American way. We have to see this through. Those people cannot have real power again. I don't care if it's Trump 2028, Frump 2028, Hump 2028. These people just cannot see real power again. They just can't. The IRS is drafting plans to cut its workforce by as much as half through a mix of layoffs, attrition, and incentivized buyouts. According to a couple of sources familiar with the situation, the people spoke Tuesday on condition of anonymity because they weren't authorized to disclose the plans. The layoffs are part of the Trump administration's efforts to shrink the size of the federal workforce through Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency by closing agencies, laying off nearly all probationary employees who have not yet gained civil service protection, and offering buyouts to almost all federal employees through deferred resignation programs to quickly reduce the government workforce. So, with these cuts maybe coming to the IRS, and we know Donald Trump, at least on some level, wants to replace the income tax with tariffs. How far away are we from Donald Trump just saying, hey, Americans, don't pay your taxes anymore. Force the government to actually implement my plan to replace your taxes, your income taxes, with tariffs. How far are we away from that? I'm kind of wondering. I mean, it's obvious Donald Trump has 0 F's left to give. You should pay your taxes, by the way. I'm just spitballing here, playing a game, theoretics, all of that's good stuff. But man, you kind of have to think that could be in the cards.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
Bill Murray joined the Joe Rogan Experience recently and says he's having second thoughts about the legacy of one Richard Nixon.
However, when I read Wired, the book written by, Woodward, about Belushi, I read like 5 pages of Wired, and I went, oh my God, they framed Nixon. like all of a sudden I went, oh my God, if this is what he writes about my friend that I've known, for half of my adult life, which is completely inaccurate, talking to like the people of the outer circle getting the story. What the hell could they have done to Nixon?
So that is Bill Murray on the Joe Rogan Experience, discussing Bob Woodward's book on his good friend Jim Belushi, realizing 5 pages in that Jim Belushi, man, that Mr. Murray had known his basically entire career life, adult life, was just utter fiction. Now having second thoughts about whether Bob Woodward's Washington Post reporting on Richard Nixon and Watergate was real. So with that as the backdrop, Bill Murray, current day, having second thoughts about whether or not Richard Nixon was framed for Watergate. With that as the backdrop, let's revisit Richard Nixon's interview with Frank Gannon back in 1983.
Do you count Woodward and Bernstein among the, in which of the two camps of reporters do you count Woodward and Bernstein?
Well, it'd be obviously where I would count them. I think that their reporting, I have not read their book, but from those that were interviewed and then misquoted in their books, I say that it was not that responsible. It was advocacy journalism.
Is there any way to get some kind of a handle on this situation? Should the media be investigated? Should it be controlled?
No, I may disagree, for example, with what some president does with his power, but I don't want to abolish the presidency, or I don't want to control it. The same is true of the press. I believe in a free press. I do not want government control under any circumstances or government censorship of either radio, television, or newspapers. But I'm simply suggesting here that all of the media should look within themselves. Look through that microscope at themselves. Look in the mirror now and then, rather than looking out there to others.
Do you think there was or is a deep throat?
I haven't the slightest idea. I read in newspaper accounts the speculation about this one or that one. They even thought Al Haig was deep throat. That's ridiculous, of course. And if all the charges are as ridiculous as that, I would gather it was probably a composite. In other words, it might have been simply a fictitious character that they had to use in order to give more credibility to what they were trying to report.
In terms of the enormous credibility and fascination that Deep Throat assumed as a result of that reporting, if it is in fact a composite, or if he doesn't exist at all, is that a serious abuse of, or how serious an abuse of journalistic power is that?
It's a terribly serious abuse. It's making something up. It is starting with the point of view and then developing the facts, the fiction, in other words, to make the point of view survive. In other words, it's basically making fact out of fiction.
What do you think? Was Richard Nixon framed? This is one of those things that I took for granted my entire childhood. I'm now having second thoughts about. Second, third, and fourth thoughts. I think he was framed. Poll of the week. I asked you, do you think we're ever going to get the Epstein docs? And boy, howdy, did y'all have a lot to say. I gave you 4 options as always. Yes and soon probably, LOL no, and other comment below. Here is the order of finished. Other was in last place. We'll get to those in just a little bit. Yes, and soon was in third place, a distant third place at 5.7%. Probably was in second place, a distant second place at 20%. And LOL, no, we're never getting the Epstein docs, was in a resounding first place at a nice 69%. Let's go to what you had to say. Will we ever get the Epstein docs? Zach says, no, I think Casey Anthony has a better chance of being hired as a nanny than that happening. Well, when you put it that way. Jeff says there will never be a full list available to the public. Auburn Tiger says some of them, but some powerful people will still be protected. Cam says not what we're hoping for or expecting. That's not what we're going to get. It would be destroyed before being turned over to us. So Cam seems to think we'll get something, but not what anybody wants or is expecting. Kenneth Parker says torches and pitchforks will get the truth at this point only. Dalton Bell says maybe some, but there will be no accountability. Kenneth Parker posts the picture of Ghislaine Maxwell with, I can't remember, I think that's Steve Jobs' widow, who says, friends with this much money don't get exposed. Some Call Me Tim says, it'll be a month that we'll get them. Melissa says, I've got my doubts. If they were serious about releasing the list, there would have already been arrests of the agents withholding the evidence from Pam Bondi. Yeah. You're probably right, Melissa. Comfortable Bribe says, show us the bodies. We'll hear about the Vegas shooter first. Tony Linda says the client list was probably purged a long time ago. I'm starting to think that's probably where this is headed, Tony. Mark Frenzel says, yes, we will, but it'll contain nothing of consequence. I'm not sure. If we actually get the real list, you have to think after all this has been built up to be, all of the secrecy, the whole Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself in that entire saga, the security cameras weren't working when he was allegedly hanging himself. There's got to be something there, right? Exponentially Charles says, just saw this. Pam Bondi says national security information will be redacted from the Epstein files as each day goes by without any new information and any release gets more qualified. The more I believe we won't see anything of importance and no one will be held accountable. Charles, I can't really blame you or anyone else at this point in this entire saga for having that level of pessimism. Stephen Holmes says redacted and used for leverage. Erica says too many people involved on both sides. Control Group Randy says we will get something, just not what we think should be released. USA Endgame says it's not that they don't want to release the list, it's that they don't want to release the list. Craig Willoughby has the gif of, what's his face, Neil deGrasse Tyson, just kind of waving his arms around and shrugging. Ryan says, my clarification on a no vote is that we will get something, but nothing of substance or consequence. Tom says, I'm somewhere between choice 1 and choice 2, which would be yes and soon or probably. Tom goes on to say, I'd like to know what is meant by soon. Is soon today or tomorrow, or is it a year from now or longer? We need names released. To quote Ray Davies of the Kinks, I'm so tired of waiting for you. Bobby Dubbs says, too many implicated on all sides. Never going to happen. JKH says some lame version with redactions, edits, and missing pages. Kurt North says the true client list has already been destroyed. Robert says by now anything incriminating to anyone important has been destroyed. So there's the theme there. If there was anything incriminating, a lot of you say it's already long gone. Pessimism abounds when it comes to the Epstein documents, and I can't blame you in the least.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.